Today we will be going over more or less the use of the tool ninjaripper. In this case, we're going to be ripping assets out of video games. Ninjaripper is a weird Russian tool. You do in fact download it off of a .ru, and it's been around for better part of 7 years. So some caveats. You're looking for ninjaripper 1.7.1. That's pretty easy to find. The version of Blender that you will have to use is version 2.79. You can make your way to the Blender website, and they've got a repository for all of the old versions. Any of the 2.79s work. If you go with 2.8, it breaks. I tried it. It's not good. So, the trick with ninjaripper, you download it, you extract the files, and wrong one. You download it, you extract the files, and then you dive into it. And in this case, because we're using the x86, you just launch the exe, and then it pulls up this little guy. So, in this case, what it is doing, most video games nowadays run off of some version of what a program called DirectX. DirectX has a bunch of different versions. Fortunately, this covers most of the common ones. This works on DX11, 9, 8, 7, and 6, so that pretty much covers, I want to say, everything going back all the way to 08, so you can do this with some ancient video games.
Does it work with DirectX 12
No, they haven't updated it yet.
or Vulkan?
Definitely not Vulkan. It uses an entirely different infrastructure for it.
Big sad.
Yeah. So you can't Vulkan rip Doom. So, the way that this works, you take the ESC, you press the triple dots, and in this case, we're targeting the EXE in the local Steam. So in this case, I'm in my Steam library, wherever it's installed. You go into the Steam apps, the common, and in this case, we're ripping Astroneer because I like the files. And then you're navigating to the EXE and then clicking on it. This targets the EXE. It's got its directory, and in most cases, you just want the intruder inject. It'll kind of try and parse out which version of DirectX it's using. This works. If you run into issues, you can try the very specific one. Astroneer, I know, runs off of DX11. You can pretty much go to the Wikipedia for any video game that you would want, and it'll tell you the DirectX version.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
Are you recording this?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to double check.
I can... Believe me, I had to delete Vermintide to make space. You then have an output directory. It tends to just do a new file in your users. In this case, this is on my C drive, so that works perfectly. Before you hit run, check your settings. It'll tell you your keybinds. In this case, you want all. For me, that's F10. Some video games will have actual functions for F10, so double check that, especially like if you're doing Kerbal Space Program. I'm fairly certain F10 brings up the cheat menu, and that causes issues. But just make this something that's not used by the video game, or something that you can deal with in the video game. You then go and you can select the forced rip interval. This more or less tells it for how long it's going to be checking the DirectX, more or less where its data is stored. I recommend keeping this low. Most of the time it will just pick up anything that's rendered in, so most video games, it'll only render stuff that's in your field of view. And then, so most of the time, ninjaripper tends to crash the application, so just point at the thing that you want, it should load it, and then you can just press it and it should work. And then if it doesn't, just try again or use a higher interval. The reason why you don't want to just go overboard with this is, for every, like, second of this, it takes a new shot, because everything recompiles in the video game. So, like, for instance, with this at 3 seconds, it will take 3 copies. So once you get that all set up, you have to press run. Now, before run occurs, If you have something like Steam open, you gotta exit it out. And we're talking about the horrifying exiting. So go into Task Manager and kill the thing. There it goes. Okay. So once you're like scrolled down and Steam does not show up anywhere, you're good to go. And then you press Run. Now I'm going to show you what comes up because it does something funky. So what it is technically doing is, because it's doing the intruder injection, Steam sees that and it kind of freaks out. So you'll see Steam pulls up, it's not loading correctly, and it says Astroneer is attempting to run with these parameters. That's more or less the intruder just wrapping itself around the game to get access to its memory. You just press OK, and then the game should launch normally. Now I'm just going to skip this step. Well, yeah, because I don't want to risk crashing it. But anyway, you launch the game, you get into... I'm just going to exit out of Astroneer because this takes forever. Okay. Once you're in the video game and you press the button, it'll either crash or it'll survive. But again, just point at whatever asset you want and press the button that you've got assigned. It's defaulted to F10. So, what that does is it will toss a bunch of files into this ninjaripper folder. Now, as you can see, it's got a lot just in that 3-second interval. What you are going to want to go navigate towards is anything that has the application. So, in this case, astro.exe. No, is that the one? X64. Feel free to delete these when you get into it. Steam, no. Web helper, no. Web helper, no. GLD, no. 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 Where are you, you turkey? Here we go. Yeah. So it's Asho Win64 shipping. So shipping is exports. So you'll see it makes this crash dump, in this case because Astroneer crashed, and then you get this big file. Inside of this big file is a lot of meshes. This was 3 seconds worth, and I think it's got somewhere, somewhere in the 300s.
400.
And they're all .rips. So this is good. This is what you're looking for. They're all... Most of the ones that are small, Astroneer has weird textures for the landscape, and so they all appear as more or less singlet points. So the way that I solve this, if you're looking for which ones are going to be interesting, sort by size. These are texture models. These, if you really know what you're doing, are really helpful, but for our purposes, we just want the .rips. And then this kind of gives you the ones that are important. So mesh 213, and we'll do 178. So, once you have that exported, or once you have that file identified, you need to boot up Blender. And so this is Blender 2.79. It is ugly as sin. This is really old UI, but it's compatible, so you kind of got to negotiate with it. You go into File, User Preferences, and you're going to the add-ons. Now, I've got this installed, but I'll show you how to do it, because it's strange. Install add-on from File, and in this case, inside of the zip folder, can I make this look better? Okay. So this is the folder that we downloaded and extracted. Inside of this, there's the 64 and 32-bit runtimes, and then tools. Inside of tools, you're going to want Blender ninjaripper. If you use 3D Max, it's also got ones for that, and Noesis, but Blender's kind of the freeware, so everyone has it. It will come in a zip folder. You need to extract the zip folder, and inside of here is a .py script. You're installing, you select this, and then press Install Add-on from File. And then once that occurs, it'll pull up something like this, and then this will be grayed out like that. And so then you just click the little checkbox, save user settings, it applies the add-on to your runtime, and then you can just exit out. Now, you're going to go to File, Import, and if it's worked successfully, you'll see that it has an option for ninjaripper.rip. So you go into this. Now we're going to, in this case, we're going to cheat. So we've got our file that we identified earlier. In this case, we're going to look at the top rip file, so we can go into Properties, and this is the handy-dandy location text. We can copy this, bada bing, bada, copy paste, and enter. Ta-da! Now, unfortunately, Blender doesn't support like sorting this, so you kind of got to manually shuffle through. But remember, these two were the biggest, so these will be probably the most interesting ones. Textures tend to be really big compared to the rest of the game. So 213 and 178 will import. So you just kind of scroll 178. In this case, I'm not control click for Blender. Shift click, because you want to get multiple. And 215. Yeah, let's get 14 while we're at it. And so you've got those three big ones selected, and import. And ta-da! Video game assets. In this case, we've got, let's turn, so 215 seems to be, looks like one of the assets. We can toggle the invisibility. Oh, is it not? Oh. Or rather, what are you? Oh, yeah. So this is, in this case, this is a 3D printer that's in the game. And if we toggle 215, it's the character model. Horrifyingly lacking a head. But, so this gives you all the mesh data. So for our purposes, I might cover this on another thing, how you can kind of modify this into being something to where you would actually want to 3D print it. That involves skeleton rigging, and that gets intense fast. But let's just go, yeah, this is simple enough. So, with this selected, we're going to go File, Export, and in this case, Blender is our friend. It exports right to STL. I'm going to slap this into my, slap it onto the desktop. 3D print files, and export. And so now, if I navigate to my desktop, 3D print files, and let's see if it doesn't. That's... Photon, get out of here. Why are you the default? Okay. I've messed that up. Alright. Delete the other two assets, even if they're not visible, because they will export. It doesn't allow you to do select delete. Please. I want you. Alright, we're just going to move on with the other file, because that will at least compile. But yeah, once you get to... you get it exported, it's an STL file, and so it'll just be whatever asset that you've ripped. Which is really cool, because you can just go right ahead and grab Prusa Slicer, if it'll load. And you can just ditch the STL file right into it. And Prusa has some pretty decent programming, so it knows, like, hey, this is too big, and it'll make it attempt to fit on your print bed. So yeah. Are there any questions?
So go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so just checking, this doesn't have to only work with Steam. This can work with any game that you can pull up that's on Direct.
Any executable that runs in DirectX, as long as you don't have something that runs in DirectX 5, which I don't think is a thing. But yeah, anything that runs DirectX, any executable. So, yeah. The other caveat will be anything that is a 3D model. So, now it might rip 2D pixel art. I'm not 100% certain. But if it runs in DirectX, it's most likely going to be using 3D models.
So this works entirely independent of game engine? Like, it doesn't matter if it's Unity or Source or Unreal or...
Yep. Anything that's got 3D files, it'll rip it right out of the data. If I remember correctly, what it's doing is it's using DirectX's visual mapper. So the way that most video games draw points is kind of the same way that we've always done, where it's triangular meshes, where it's 3 points in space, and then it's connecting those points and then doing math upon those to draw them in a scene. And so this is more or less abusing that data because it's not running purely... The reason why this isn't just a pure 3D file, that it's got some of the, what would classically be considered like textured parts on top of it, is because it's using the DirectX, more or less what DirectX is using to draw it. So if you can see it, most of the time you'll be able to export it. Of course, there are some things that are just going to be textures just slapped on very poorly in 2 dimensions. I haven't had it happen yet, but I suspect that, like, say for instance, there was a texture for up on top of this dome. What I would suspect would happen is you would get panels for where the texture slaps onto. And that's where, like, if you really wanted the file, you would have to go into Blender and overlay the texture file onto this, and then actually do some model work yourself to make it appear on the physical model.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. I should give you a general warning. Do not sell anything from this. If you can't tell, someone did a lot of work on this model to put it into the video game. Let it be said, this shit is copyrighted, so don't go and sell these things. You can make them for yourself, but if you try to sell them, there's a very, very, very good chance that someone would be like, hey, that's a game asset. Why are you doing this? It's a reason why modders get yelled at a lot, especially when they monetize mods for stealing game assets. So, like, one that keeps popping up, it's kind of a meme onto itself, is people love to rip demonic assets from multiple Doom games. They'll rip textures and stuff and just kind of slap it into their game. It's a little bit of... It's strange to see where it pops up. You'll see them in Skyrim mods, Fallout mods. New Vegas mods actually had a recent one that was found that was kind of silly. But yeah, don't steal other people's stuff and try and sell it. Any other questions? Seeing none?
Oh, one more. I was trying to find that ninjaripper thing. Could you post a link to where you recommend to download it?
Yeah, hold
on. You don't have to do it now, but...
yeah. I went... Yeah, it's the sketchy Game Banana one.
Oh, okay.
I have one last question as well. Is there any chance that this like messes with your game files at all? Like corrupts anything?
So far, it seems to be read-only. I'm
Okay.
not I can't say that I have enough experience with this to be confident that it's purely a read-only. Steam hasn't complained it doesn't complain about it. You will have to, I will say, you will have to, after you launch the game with Ninja Ripper, you will have to refresh your Steam thing because it detects Ninja Ripper, let me say this correctly. It detects that Ninja Ripper is there, and so if you go and try and boot another game, it'll kind of yell at you because it's like, hey, you've got like memory pointers all over this thing, and it can't close because Ninja Ripper is running somewhere else, and so it's holding those memory lanes, or it's holding those memory assets open, and so it won't let you exit out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that was sarcastic.
No, it was genuine.
Okay.
And that was just something that I was like actually concerned about. Like, is this random Russian software going to break my video games?
Yeah, that's a fair question. This
I don't want it to mess with my
version,
games.
so this version has been around for 3 years as of the current build. But yeah, it's been around since like 2014 with about a lot of downloads, so yeah, pretty safe for the most part. Let it be said, this is a manual download. If you guys are ever afraid of like really sketchy stuff, just try to keep away from auto updates as much as possible. Because you don't know who's gonna pick up what random software that you've got auto updates enabled for on your computer, and that tends to be the way that some stuff gets on people's computers because they have auto updates enabled. So someone just pushes through malware. All right. If anyone actually tries doing this and they run into file issues, let me know. Blender has arguments with STL files between Prusa a lot of the time, or just any slicer in general. They like to yell at each other. Blender, or most 3D models are like, oh yeah, we need to be technically watertight. And Blender just kind of doesn't do that for funsies because it makes the math easy. So if you run into issues with that, I can kind of help buff over the edges. You more or less have to use Mesh Mixer as a go-between because otherwise, it just kind of, it'll show things are there, but when you go to slice them, they're not present, and it makes things kind of a pain. Technically, what those are it's objects that are so thin that they technically don't exist. And so Prusa Slicer doesn't really know what to do with it because it's thinner than like a layer, or sorry, it's thinner than the nozzle. And so when it goes to slice it, it doesn't really know what to do, so it just doesn't show up. So you'll get parts that like look totally cool and like entirely there, and then you go into Slicer and like half of it's missing. Kind of dealt with that on one of the old files that I got off of Smash Brothers actually. It requires fixing. But
have you ever heard of it might be Microsoft, it might be like there's some web service where you upload the file and it'll use AI to try and repair it?
Yeah, so that's it started with an E, or no, it started with an N.
Netfab?
Netfab, yeah. So Netfab does online stuff, and actually what's really cool is it uses a basic version. Actually, if you guys are still watching the stream, you can see that this one's yelling at it, and so it actually uses NetFab's service to go ahead and fix models, which is actually
Oh, I'll
really
be
cool.
damned.
It uses a basic version though, so if it doesn't catch everything, I'd recommend going into NetFab manually.
Yeah, for those that don't know, NetFab is a online service. You literally just go on, it's free. You put in your file, you upload it. It takes like a minute, and then it'll spit back out a repaired model. And usually can fix a lot of problems without too much hassle.
I definitely recommend doing that over learning Blender about any damn day of the week. Because I learned Blender the first time to try and fix it, and it sucked. Let the AI do it. Anything else before I drone on for another half hour?
Do you have a picture of your favorite thing you've made with this?
Honestly, it's the Astroneer. This is called your home base in Astroneer. I really like this model. The other file that I have that technically was done with this software was... Oh, do I have it? I bet I have it on me. It's not going to be that. It's... What's this? I want to say it was this. Alright, so Zach. I think he already left. Yeah, I did. So technically this is a model. This was for a gift for, so this, I used to play, well, I still play, a lot of PlanetSide, and this is one of the airships in the game. And so, as a gift to one of the people that I knew on the game, the plan was to rip the asset out and then 3D print it. And this was done with it, but it was on an older version, so there's parts missing, and it's a terrible model because it was an early version of the thing, and if I can actually navigate using the correct version of Blender, you can see it's non-watertight hollow. There's just gaping holes in it. This is where Blender cheats, because you can do this, and Blender's like, yeah, no, that's totally fine. If you do this with something like Prusa, it will scream at you, because it's wondering where the edge is, and where the in is, and where's, like, the volume, and so it just kind of sees it as just a clump of spaghetti just kind of sitting there, vectorized. But yeah, this was a really fun file. And this is kind of where I, like, this would be kind of the model that I really learned Blender on and how to manipulate and fix stuff. It's still not complete, but it was fun.